So this week, the Packers will be facing off against the Arizona Cardinals at Lambeau Field. The Cardinals come in 2-3. They did just have a very big victory against the San Francisco 49ers, beating them 24-23 last week. The Packers sitting at 3-2 after beating the Los Angeles Rams 24-19. And now, at this point of the season, we're 5 games in. Because Jordan Love missed 2 of those games because of his MCL sprain, he has now played in 3 total games for the Packers. He's played in the past 2, losing to Minnesota and then beating the Los Angeles Rams. And I think in the past 2 games, from Minnesota to Los Angeles, Jordan Love has gotten into more of a rhythm. He threw 3 interceptions versus the Vikings defense that was causing a ton of problems, which has caused a lot of problems for lots of different offenses around the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, of course, threw 3 interceptions versus the Vikings defense last week, a week after. Love threw 3 interceptions. And Love did still have that one bad pick 6 against the Rams, but it felt to me like after that pick 6, Love was a lot more in control, and I think that the more that we see him play, now he's 2 games back from his MCL sprain, I think we're going to consistently see him start to make better and better decisions. Is he always going to? No, he clearly loves to push the ball down the field, which I don't have that much of a problem with. Sometimes he's going to throw interceptions. It's probably going to be more so than Aaron Rodgers in his career because he was, sort of all-time great when it came to not turning the ball over. And so I think that the Packers can get away with an interception here or there from Jordan Love, but obviously we can't keep seeing 3 interception games, which we only saw that one game against the Vikings so far this season. So coming into this game, even with Malik Willis starting 2 games for the Packers, they are the 8th best scoring offense in the NFL. They have the 4th most yards and the 4th most yards per play. And if we look at the Packers with Jordan Love so far, he has 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He is 23rd in passer rating and 31st in completion percentage over expected. So there is no doubt that Love can improve his accuracy, and I would expect it to improve as the weeks go by. And if we look at this Cardinals defense heading into this game, so far this season, they haven't been very good all in all. They're the 27th scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 25.8 points per game. And they are 25th in yards allowed, 27th in yards per play allowed at 5.9. So I do think the Packers will be able to take advantage of this Cardinals defense that has been, bottom 5, bottom 7 defense in the league in some of these, most important statistical categories. And one thing as well, last week against the Los Angeles Rams, the Packers were without Christian Watson because of his injury. And of course, Romeo Doubs got suspended, so he was missing last week. So Malik Heath got a ton of snaps. Dontavian Wicks got a ton of snaps. And I feel like the Packers were having to get a little bit acclimated to, not having Doubs, not having Christian Watson, which they had earlier in the season. And this week, Romeo Doubs will be back. I was contemplating, will Doubs be out there with the starters right away? Or is it possible that Matt LaFleur maybe allow some other guys to start to get Doubs reacclimated and sort of see how that goes? That was something I thought about earlier today. Not sure if it'll happen, but I assume that Doubs will likely be starting once again, but something to keep an eye on. And I do think the Packers should be able to take advantage of this Cardinals secondary, that if we look at them so far this year, they're 18th in pass yards allowed per game, 28th in pass yards per play allowed at 7.1. And even though Jordan Love has struggled with some interceptions, I still think he has one of the best arms in the NFL. He is one of those guys where if you need a touchdown, you have a minute, 2 minutes, he can move the ball down the field at will. And with Tucker Kraft sort of erupting the past 2 weeks, he looks like he may end up being one of the better tight ends in the league. He is really, really good after the catch. We saw that with his long touchdown catch, stiff arming a guy, running all the way to the end zone. And so the Packers have so many weapons on this offense, and even, missing Christian Watson, Jaden Reed has been the most productive Packers receiver by a pretty wide margin this year, and he's really taken, I think, another step up from last season overall. And another area where I think the Packers should be able to take advantage, the Cardinals' rushing defense also has not been very good. They're 28th in rush yards allowed per game, 20th in rush yards allowed per play at 4.6. You compare to the Packers and their rushing attack, they have the 3rd most rush yards per game in the NFL and the 5th most rush yards per play. So just looking at this advantage on paper, I think the Packers do have a massive advantage here because of their ability to run the ball. Jordan Love, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I still stand by that, even though he has dealt with, some interception issues recently. But with Josh Jacobs so far this season, averaging 4.5 yards a carry, 402 yards in 5 games, he's been a very, very solid addition, and he has just such a great ability to, when holes get blocked up, we saw it last week on his touchdown run, he's able to bounce it outside and beat linebackers, beat corners to the outside, and, get things done in that way. And Emmanuel Wilson also, as the, second back there, has 35 carries. He is averaging the same yards per carry as Josh Jacobs. So when Emmanuel Wilson has been on the field, there hasn't really been much of a drop-off, which is really great to see. And then if we move to the, offensive line versus Cardinals defensive line, so far this season, the Packers offensive line, I still think has been one of the better units in the NFL. They are 15th in pressure percentage allowed at 31.5%, but they have the 6th fewest sacks allowed at 8. And so this facing against the Cardinals pass rush, that is 31st in pressure percentage, I think that the Packers should be able to keep Jordan Love pretty clean in this one. They did a pretty good job last week, especially a little later in the game versus a really good Rams defensive line that was first in pressure percentage this season so far. And I think that as Jordan Love has gotten a little healthier with that MCL sprain, you could see he was able to move around a little bit more last week, and I think we'll see that continue to get better this week. Hopefully it's not even, noticeable, and as the weeks go by, he continues to, have more strength in that knee, which seemed to be mostly okay last week against the Los Angeles Rams. And really my biggest question going into this one is, can Love have some of those big plays where you're like, what in the world, how in the world did you do that? While also not throwing a lot of bad balls like he did throwing that pick 6, which I sort of understand that he was falling back. He didn't want a safety, so he was being a little risky. In hindsight, obviously, you would rather, not throw it exactly where he did. But I do think he'll clean some of this up a little bit. If we look at the Cardinals defense, they're currently 10th in interceptions at 4, with 4 total. So they've been pretty good at forcing turnovers. But I think all in all, this Packers offense should be able to move the ball pretty easily in this one. Last week against the Rams, it did take a little bit of time for the Packers offense to get rolling. It really was the third quarter where the Packers forced 2 turnovers, where the Packers were able to really bounce back and have 2 scoring drives, 2 Tucker Kraft touchdowns in the third quarter, which pretty much sealed it for them in that game. The fourth quarter, the Rams almost came back at the end there, but luckily the Packers were able to hold on. So I think we're going to see a pretty big day from this Packers offense against a Cardinals defense that hasn't been very good. Now, I will give the Cardinals credit. Against the San Francisco 49ers, they did allow 23 points in the first half, but they ended up winning the game last week, and they allowed 0 points in the second half because they forced 2 interceptions and a fumble. So this defense can make some plays from time to time, and so I feel like with any team in the NFL, you can't necessarily take them lightly because these are NFL caliber players, and for stretches, this Cardinals defense has been good, like the second half last week. But all in all, I think the Packers have the advantage, a pretty big advantage on offense. Now, if we move to the other side of the ball, looking at this Packers defense versus Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense. So far this season, the Packers' biggest strength has been their ability to force turnovers. They have been the best in the NFL at takeaways, and they also are second in the NFL in interceptions, with Xavier McKinney having an interception in 5 straight games, which is pretty remarkable, shows just how great of a signing he was this season. But if you do take away the takeaways, the Packers defense is pretty, a lot of times they allow teams to move the ball down the field pretty easily. You sort of see that in their yards allowed per game. They're 21st in yards per game allowed, 16th in yards per play allowed. So I'd say they're a pretty average defense. When you add the turnovers, that sort of takes them, I think, to potentially top 10 level if they can keep this up. But not looking at turnovers, they're a pretty average defense when it comes to points allowed, 14th, 21st in yards per game, 16th in yards per play allowed. And they are going to have their hands full against this Cardinals offense. They are one of the better units, I would say, in the NFL. The Cardinals' total offense right now, just sort of looking at their overall statistics. So far this season, the Cardinals have the 12th best scoring offense. They're 14th in yards per game. And their biggest strength is their rushing attack. If you look at their rushing attack so far this season, they're 4th in rush yards per game, 3rd in rush yards per play at 5.5. And so it seems to me that their offense is pretty focused on being able to run the ball. James Conner has 379 yards, 4.6 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns. Kyler Murray, of course, his rushing ability is something to watch in this one. He has 247 yards at 10.7 yards per carry. In the first 2 weeks, the Packers pass rush, the whole talking point was because they faced mobile quarterbacks, guys like Jalen Hurts, guys like Anthony Richardson. The strategy from Jeff Hafley seemed to be, okay, we're going to try to contain them, keep them in the pocket, maybe not focus as much on, getting pressure and doing all we can to sack the quarterback. It seemed to be more so, let's try to keep these guys in the pocket. Don't let them beat you with their legs, which for the most part, the Packers were able to do a pretty good job of. And I would assume they'll take a similar approach here with Kyler Murray. But the thing is with Kyler Murray, even if you can, keep him contained in the pocket, he's been a very, very good passer so far this season. You look at his overall stats, 972 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 99.1 passer rating, which is 9th best in the NFL. And so he's been done a pretty good job of not forcing a lot of not having a lot of turnovers, only 2 interceptions in the games he's played so far this season. And the Cardinals do have a ton of weapons on offense, of course, with Marvin Harrison Jr. being the biggest addition. He's a, legit wide receiver weapon. The Packers hopefully will get Jair Alexander back this week after missing the past 2 games. And I think we'll see an uptick in what the Packers can do in the secondary with Jair back. But outside of Jair Alexander, and I think Carrington Valentine has played pretty good, guys like, Eric Stokes hasn't been great the past couple games. Keyshawn Nixon, I think, has been solid. The Packers last week, of course, decided to put Evan Williams at safety next to Xavier McKinney, as well as putting Javon Bullard in the slot, Keyshawn Nixon on the outside. If Jair is back, I am curious to see who is going to be that starting safety next to Xavier McKinney, because I do think Evan Williams made a case to be the starting safety next to McKinney. Had a few pass breakups last week, a big pass breakup to end the game. And so the Packers, I think, do have some weapons in the secondary. I do think, though, this will depend a little bit on Jair being here. And the Cardinals also have guys like, Michael Wilson, tight end Trey McBride. So there's a lot of weapons on this Cardinals offense. And based on what we've seen from the Packers defense, I do think the Cardinals should be able to move the ball a good amount this game. And the big question is, can the Packers keep this, this ability to force turnovers? Can that keep happening time and time again? Because right now, this defense is pretty predicated on forcing turnovers. It was a focus of this defense coming in this offseason. So hopefully we see that happen here. And I just wonder, in a game where if the Packers don't force a turnover, how's that game going to go? Because, the more turnovers the Packers force, the more you put the ball into Jordan Love and the offense's hands. And so let's hope it continues. But I do wonder what's going to happen if there is a game here where they aren't able to force any turnovers. Can they still come in and do enough to win the game? Another area of the Packers' strength on defense so far this season, they've been pretty good on third downs. They are tied for 13th when it comes to third down conversion percentage allowed at 35.59%. So of course, if your defense can be pretty good at getting off the field after third down, you're overall going to have a somewhat solid defense. Now in the red zone, the Packers' defense has not been great. They're 21st in red zone scoring percentage allowed at 61.1%. So that is definitely an area where they could keep up. One area I'm going to watch this week specifically, because I mentioned the Cardinals and their ability to run the ball. What is this Packers run defense going to be able to do against James Conner and Kyler Murray? Because so far this season, I would say all in all, the Packers run defense has been, I think, a little better than last season. I think all in all, they've been, they haven't really been bad, I would say. There's been a couple games here and there where it hasn't been great. But all in all, looking at their stats so far for the Packers defense, 11th best in rush yards allowed per game at 114.2, 16th in rush yards allowed per play at 4.4. So I would say all in all, it's been a pretty average defensive unit against the run, which is better than being, one of the worst in the league. And I think that we've seen them be good at times, bad at times. Against the Rams ran the ball pretty well, 4.8 yards carry, 134 yards. The week prior, the Packers held the Vikings and Aaron Jones to about 3.5 yards per carry. So sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not quite as good. I'm curious to see what they can do against this Cardinals rushing attack that has a lot of guys who can beat you, in Kyler Murray as well as James Conner. Now looking at the Packers pass rush, which has been a big talking point so far. Right now, 15th in pressure rate. Lots of these stats are from NFL Pro, some from PFF. They are 7th in sacks with 16. 8 of those did come against the Tennessee Titans. And the Packers are 11th best in sack percentage. The thing with the Packers, when they are bringing four, like their front four, like Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, hopefully he's healthy soon. He, of course, missed last game. The other guys who come in a little bit as well. When they bring four, they haven't been very good at getting pressure. When only bringing 4 or less, according to NFL Pro, the Packers are 18th in pressure percentage at 27.6%. However, when they bring the blitz, which is, sending 5 or more, they have the highest pressure percentage in the NFL at 50%. So that's pretty good to see what the Packers are able to do when they do blitz guys like Edgerrin Cooper, who, I wish he was blitzing every play. Not actually, because I do think there is that surprise factor because the Packers don't really blitz at a very high rate, 29th rate in the NFL at 19.1%. But when they do blitz, they are the most effective team at getting pressure in the NFL. And so Jeff Hafley is pretty particular when he brings those blitzes, and it seems to be working. And I do wonder if that's partly because, offenses don't know when they're going to blitz because they don't do it all the time. And so when they bring it, it seems that it works at a very, very high level. And if we look at this Cardinals offensive line, they've been pretty good so far this year overall. 7th best in pressure percentage allowed at 28.8%. 12th fewest sacks allowed at 11. One thing to watch, though, they did lose one of their best guards this week. Will Hernandez is on the IR after this past game, and so that may be an area where, with a backup in there, the Packers could be able to take advantage. But all in all, the Cardinals O-line has been pretty good, and I would assume, having Kyler Murray back there, who's able to escape the pocket at one of the highest levels, that probably helps, avoid a lot of sacks out there, and we'll see if the Packers can, track him down some this week. But to give my score prediction, just based on these matchups, I think that when you look at the offenses, 2 very high-powered offenses, the Packers defense, I would say just when it comes to allowing points, somewhat average. Cardinals defense, pretty bad. I feel like it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. So I'm going to say Packers win this game 34, Cardinals 27. That's going to be my final score prediction at Lambeau Field. Should be a fun one. Should be an entertaining game to watch. If you guys want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.